Why is this herb ruled by that planet? Who decided the correspondences of herbs recorded in books like this one, an encyclopedia of magical herbs? And should we believe them? Welcome back to the Magical Herbalist YouTube channel. In this video, we'll look at how astrology first became a model for healing in ancient Mesopotamia, where the earliest physicians and priests used the movements of the heavens to guide the treatment of disease with plants. We'll then take a look at how the Renaissance alchemists and Hermetic thinkers of the early modern period have really influenced what we now call magical herbalism by assigning planetary rulers to herbs, not just for healing the body, but for aligning the soul with the divine. If you practice spells or rituals today, or even just read your horoscope, you're participating in a very ancient tradition. So the beliefs that stars and planets influence us, they shape us and perhaps even govern us, goes back thousands of years to the dawn of the first civilizations and their religions. As an ancient cosmological system, astrology assigns certain celestial bodies like the sun, the moon, and the orbiting planets that can be observed by the eye with certain properties which can affect us in a very deep and deterministic way. So how does this look in practice? When we view our reality through the astrological lens, the moon governs our emotions and all aspects of ourselves which relate to the night realm, such as sleep, dreams, and even the subconscious mind. So if the conscious and waking mind corresponds with the day and with the sun, then the subconscious corresponds with the night and the moon. Venus rules love, beauty and desire, with the power to make us fall head over heels in love, or to activate and direct our desires to a person or a thing we wish to possess. Now, astrology may not be an especially accurate or a reliable or a safe way to predict how a certain body part or a disease will respond to a herbal remedy. But for many people, astrology provides a very compelling model for navigating the complex realm of the psyche. Also, it has become a very powerful model within which to practice magic and ritual and for profound self-discovery. Astrology really originates with the ancient stargazers who combined astronomy and the movements of the planets with predictions of future events. And of course, herbs and plants also follow the seasonal cycle, which is mirrored or can be mapped by the celestial cycle around the year. All the healing plants, the diseases, the people, the body parts are all belonging at the level of the microcosm and can be perceived as being determined or somewhat influenced and affected by the corresponding movement of the planets and the stars, which are at the macrocosm. So understanding the microcosm and the macrocosm as a way of perceiving reality is really important to understanding how plants and planets came to be so tightly associated. This belief is underpinned by a Hermetic principle that in all things are the same things. So the heavenly virtues of the moon or Venus can be found in plants, in the body and mind, in minerals and animals, for example. Hence you can discover Lunarian things or Venusian things or martial things in the natural world. Ancient astrology has given the esoteric arts an intuitive framework for being able to match herbs with ritual intentions. It's given us a table of planetary hours and days for timing rituals and lunar and diurnal phases and astrological transits imbued with rich personal meanings that we can work with, all within a system of self-discovery. For example, if you need to build strength and well-being after a period of illness, you might call upon the powers of the sun, the celestial body of healing and physical well-being, and work with herbs which correspond with the sun. If you're casting a spell for justice, you might call on Jupiter, and cast your spell on a Thursday, which is Jupiter's day, and under a waxing moon. But here's the problem, or rather the first problem. How do we know which herb to use for which planet? I mean, some associations are intuitive. Take the rose. You don't need to study esoteric correspondences to feel that rose represents love and beauty and desire. Its velvet petals, its sweet fragrance, and its sensual beauty. All these qualities feel naturally Venusian, qualities that the heart longs for. But which herb belongs to Jupiter and why? How do you go about choosing? You might use a book like this encyclopedia of magical herbs and pick a herb from the Jupiter section. With all these choices, you really have to take the author's word as gospel. Like, who did all this deep work to uncover the divine celestial virtues of Jupiter in the first place? Now, I could do a longer video on this book. I can see it diverges from my own understanding of herb magic and even from the Hermetic ideals of the Renaissance alchemists, from where I believe the author procured these correspondences. Take basil, for example, which here is said to correspond with Mars and with prosperity. Now, if magic really worked in the way this book suggests, then every Italian pizza chef would surely, literally, be a millionaire. I think this type of magic is like make a herb charm to connect with a long-lost friend by tying the plant on string around your neck, then sit by the phone and wait for that friend to call. Now, I wouldn't do such a thing in my practice, and I wouldn't expect you to either. So that's the first problem. Some correspondences make intuitive sense, while others feel arbitrary or even contradictory. Now, what about yarrow? Is it Venusian, lunar, or martial? Your guess is as good as mine. Now for the second problem, a more modern one perhaps. Let's go back to the rose and Venus. We all can agree that rose feels like Venusian, but what is Venus really? The ancient world never knew the planet up close, but we do. Venus is a scorching, toxic sphere cloaked in clouds of sulfuric acid that apparently smells like rotten eggs. Her atmosphere would poison and cremate you in seconds, so she's not exactly your ideal lover. And yet from Earth, Venus appears radiant. She twinkles beside the moon, a luminous pearl in the night sky. And so the myth endures, not because it's literal, but because it's deeply symbolic. We use herbs in rituals to evoke peace, love, protection, and manifestation, to deepen our wisdom, clarity, and intuition. Let's now explore the roots of the esoteric connection between plants and planets. We'll begin in the ancient world, where the gods resided in the heavens, and the heavens ruled over the earth, and then we'll follow the thread into the later Renaissance era, where alchemists turned these symbolic connections into a complex system of magical practice, one that we still recognize today. The oldest known connections between herbs and celestial forces come from the cradle of civilization in ancient Mesopotamia. The Mesopotamians were the first true astrologers whose cuneiform star maps and omens show that they were masters at combining astronomy with divination. They were also the first to record large-scale herbals or medical encyclopedias, including remedies for diseases. In Mesopotamian culture, medicine, magic, and ritual were inseparable. So a healing spell was also a prayer and a treatment all at once. Astrology wasn't just a belief system, it was the calendar that governed when to act. The phases of the moon, the rise of certain planets, this all determined when to offer a remedy or to perform a ritual. If you're curious about this topic, I highly recommend looking up the lectures of Dr. Irvin Finkel, curator at the British Museum. His talks are available for free online and are full of delightful and nerdy insights. It is in Mesopotamia that we also find one of the earliest recorded structures for magical and medical theory, the 12-part division of the human body corresponding with the 12 zodiac signs. This system is called Melothesia. So that's Aries rules the head, Sagittarius the hips and the thighs, Capricorn the knees, and so on. What's happening here is quite profound. So the closed system of astrology is being mapped onto the human body. So this is creating a cosmic map of disease and healing for the earliest physicians. Now, this wasn't just an abstract theory, it was practical and it was practiced, and it really helped them to advance medicine and be more effective. You'll also find that this is how any theory is applied to understanding any phenomena today. Just like the Mesopotamians used the zodiac to map the body and its ailments, our modern scientific models do something similar. Take Newton's physics, which predicted planetary motion with astonishing precision until Einstein showed us that time and space bend and warp under gravity. Quantum physics is also now showing how electrons don't behave as we thought they did, but the Bohr model is still taught in schools because it's intuitive and mostly it's still useful. So all theories are models, even if they aren't objectively true. They can still be helpful and serve a purpose. Mesopotamian healing was often the work of two figures. There was the Asu, the physician, who knew the plants and their physical properties and how to heal diseases and understood the body. And then there was the Asipu, or the ritualist shaman, the exorcist, who knew the spiritual, the celestial forces involved in healing and disease. So together they would treat the patient in a holistic way, one with the plants and the other with incantations, offerings, prayers, according to celestial timings. So this ancient Mesopotamian magical medicine didn't disappear, but it evolved. It continued to shape healing traditions well into the Middle Ages, all the way up to the 17th century. That means that modern science and medicine are actually very young by comparison. From Hippocrates in classical Greece to Galen in Rome, from Avicenna in Persia to Paracelsus in Renaissance Europe, the authority of both natural and celestial forces in healing was widely accepted. And during this long era, astrology, astronomy, and medicine were not separate disciplines. They formed a unified worldview, a cosmic ecology of body, spirit, and planets and stars. But here's something we don't find in the early ancient texts: the idea that specific plants are ruled by specific planets. Assigning planetary rulers to herbs seems to emerge a bit later, especially in the magical and alchemical texts of the Renaissance magicians. So we find plenty of correspondences in the writings of Paracelsus, of Cornelius Agrippa, and in the magical grimoires like the Key of Solomon. So these magical and spiritual thinkers were very much deeply inspired by the Corpus Hermeticum, the teachings of Plato and Plotinus, and the mystical visions of the Neoplatonists. For them, herbalism and plant law was no longer just about curing illness. Plants, as well as minerals and animals and all things of the earthly realm, became a way to engage with the cosmos and achieve some kind of spiritual unity. Herbs were used in oils, incenses, salves, perfumes, and offerings, blended according to correspondences. These were used to draw down celestial virtues and to intervene with the daimon, to convene and participate in nature's mystical cycles. And this is where magical herbalism begins to take on the shape that we recognize today, not simply as an extension of folk healing, but as a spiritual path. As magical herbalists and practitioners today, I feel we, for the most part, share the vision of the Renaissance alchemists. We blend teas and tinctures, we use ritual incenses and sacred perfumes, not only to soothe the body or to make make us smell nice or to feel good, but to attune the spirit and the psyche. We work in harmony with the moon's phases and with planetary days and hours and with the wheel of the year. Not because we're superstitious or adhering to tradition, but because it's a way of listening to the world and tuning in and responding and participating in its many mysteries. In this way, we don't just use herbs, we collaborate with them as allies, as emissaries of the divine. We seek to create not only health, but wholeness. So why liken the herbs you use in ritual and spell work to the planets, to the celestial bodies above? Why speak of Mars and Venus, Saturn and the moon when we could just simply describe the flavour, the scent or the chemical compound? Well, I think there are two answers, two dimensions to this question. First is relationship through discovery. So when you begin asking which planetary virtues inhabit this plant, you're not just assigning a label to the plant or categorizing it, but you're really engaging in a process. It's a devotional practice really of getting to know the plant's spirit, its being. You begin to notice much more. Its colours, its behaviour, its temperament, how it grows, when it blooms, how it makes you feel. So it draws out your imagination, your sensitivity and your capacity to relate. And that's the very essence of a magical practice. So correspondences, they don't just describe a plant, but they really awaken it in your perception and give it real agency and another layer of life. Secondly, is that planetary correspondences provide a sort of a living model for the soul, and astrology, especially the traditional 7 celestial bodies, is still a very powerful model for understanding the psyche and for navigating self-transformation. So the planets are archetypes. They're not just physical bodies in space, but they are forces, they're virtues which are like inner gods, the daimons, the teachers. So when we work with planetary correspondences in Magick, we're really inviting those forces into our ritual. We're asking for their help, for alignment with them, and for activation of their virtues. For example, the moon offers deep soulful reflection, while Mars brings courage and determination. Jupiter may bestow wisdom and expansion and so on. Because astrology moves through the year, through the wheel of time, it naturally aligns us with the seasons and just the turning tides of the world around us. It makes the spiritual path one which is cyclical and rhythmic, just like how the garden grows around the year, or like personal growth itself. So in this way, working with planetary correspondences isn't just about pinning things down, but it's about participating in the living and thrumming and the complex web of nature, alive with many kinds of spirit. So in this sense, magical herbalism is not a passive tradition. When we understand its lineage, we can see how it asks us to practice it. So that's to work with our hands, with our hearts and our minds and our spirits, to blend, to observe and to listen, to notice what's blooming and to sense the different fragrances and their properties, and to use what's timely and seasonal. The remedies we create are not only preventative for the body, but they are sacred rituals of alignment. So these are daily acts of participation. This is herbalism as a path of gnosis. So how did the alchemists arrive at their planetary correspondences then? Was there a divine book they were reading from, a fixed table or charts handed down from the ancient sages or from the gods like the Bible? Not exactly. What we see in their writings is something far more human and far more interesting, in my opinion. Their system was built on inference, so that's from practice, intuition, and centuries of inherited wisdom and law. It's true they studied ancient texts, but they also observed nature. They worked through ritual and experimentation, as scientists do. and they even made spiritual and poetic leaps to make inferences about correspondences between herbs and planetary virtues. Theirs was primarily a work that blends symbolism with science and with rational knowledge and intuitive feeling. And what's revealing is this: the correspondences they arrived at were relational, not absolute, not factual in a scientific sense, but meaningful in the deepest magical sense. Agrippa himself says in Book 1 that magicians come to know the virtues of things. They are tried and they are found out, which are in them specifically or in any one individual by way of special gift. So it is through insight, exploration, science, blending science, facts, intuition and divine inspiration, and a long devotion to the spiritual art that the practitioner arrives at the correspondence. So Culpeper too gives us a glimpse of this intuitive path. In his complete herbal, he writes, "Then to find out the reason of the operation of herbs, plants, etc., by the stars went I, and herein I could find but a few authors, but those as full of nonsense and contradiction as an egg is full of meat. This not being pleasing and less profitable to me, I consulted with my two brothers, Dr. Reason and Dr. Experience, and took a voyage to visit my mother Nature, by whose advice I at last obtained my desire. Being warned by Mr. Honesty, a stranger in our days, to publish it to the world, I have done it." So with the alchemists and the herbalists who have come before, I think what we can see emerging is a spiritual collaboration between the practitioner and the plant, between the heavens, a belief in the heavens, and relationship with the earth. So why does it feel frustrating, even confusing sometimes, when you look up the ruling planet of a herb and it doesn't seem to fit, or you just don't want to have to use unverifiable and unreliable information, as none of us should have to these days? I mean, maybe basil doesn't feel like a prosperity herb to you. Maybe it does. I'm personally very happy using basil as an emissary, liking its energy somewhere between the sun and Mercury. Maybe yarrow seems both Venusian and lunar to you. Maybe rose is more than just Venusian. Maybe it's solar in some contexts or lunar in others. Maybe that's because correspondences are not hard facts, yet they're often treated like objective truths. I personally don't feel that correspondences have any place in an encyclopedia, but they do in a personal grimoire where you can work out the correspondences of the herbs that you wish to use through your research and experience. So all historical information, like these charming old herbals and texts, are great jumping off points, but I wouldn't treat them as solid, reliable facts to be carried out to the letter when it comes to working with herbs and magic. One way to look at it is that the link between herbs and planetary virtues are symbolic relationships, so they're lenses through which we interpret our experiences and our impressions. If you try to force a plant into one planetary box, you might find it doesn't quite fit at all. This is because a single herb, you might agree, like a single person, is complex, always changing, evolving, and interacting with its environment. Your understanding of that herb will shift depending on the season, the place, your own spirit, and the intention behind your ritual. The hawthorn in spring is quite different from the hawthorn in autumn. Its roots are nothing like its fruits. You could spend a lifetime with a single plant and never arrive at a clear, final, and stable definition. And that's not a flaw in the system, that's the point and the beauty and the art of magical herbalism. And this is why life is imbued with mystery. And that's because meaning is not fixed. The symbolic meanings of herbs and planets shift across cultures and generations and personal experience. As the modern philosopher Hilary Lawson reminds us today, that truth is a function of the model, not of reality. And this is a powerful idea to hold in mind when practicing magic and astrology. If perspective is all there is, if our conscious experience constitutes the reality we inhabit, then magic is not irrational. It is a rational, constructive, and beneficial way of fashioning the kind of mind that you want to inhabit. Even scientific facts, as objective as they seem, form only a small part of how we actually understand or experience reality and the things of nature. So facts, they can often tell us what is, but rarely what it means. And this is where magical models like astrology can really shine. Even if astrology is no longer to be helpful to medicine or the hard sciences, it still remains a very powerful guiding framework for ritual, psychology, symbolism, and gnosis. Now, why is this? Well, I believe it's because its archetypes still speak to us. So the ancient gods, the spirits, the daimons, they still stir within us and mean something to us. We're still experiencing them in the same way the ancient people who believed in them were experiencing them. And we have this language for communing with them through astrology and Magick and its ancient archetypes. They provide something unique to us on a level that chemistry, biology, and physics often cannot. But here's the real key. So the power of magical herbalism doesn't come from charts or tables. It doesn't reside in fixed correspondences frozen in time in encyclopedic books. The meaning, the correspondences and the connections you make between plants and planets come from practice and devotion to the symbols, the language, and the art form. And on this path, you are literally walking between worlds. A professor I once had said that real learning benefits come from when you can hold competing theories in your mind at once and learn to perceive reality through each lens and make assessments about what's going on. So I was studying the theory and history of international relations, where you are working with many multiple theories of what happened and why, and making predictions about which way things are going to go. Knowledge creation hasn't really changed in thousands of years. The only thing that I can see that's really new is the scientific method. I was studying an MSc, which is a Master's of Science. This way of using your mind is really an art form. So a Master's of the Arts, more appropriately, I think, which contrasts with science's focus on discovering absolute truths. So the way I see it is that we need to be able to assess reality from different theoretical lenses and models, and we need to get the sciences and the humanities working together. So for me, magical herbalism, it bridges the humanities, religion and science, and also the spiritual and the material realms. Hence, we walk between many worlds. Deducing planetary correspondences for our magical practice and ascribing meanings to herbs in order to work with them and to access their psycho-spiritual powers is one of the major art forms within this discipline. If you work with herbs or astrology, or if you are curious in planetary correspondences, then I hope this discussion has given you some ideas or inspiration for deepening your relationship with nature and with cosmic archetypes. Of course, this is all just based on my understanding, which will differ from other practitioners. However, I do think it's good to develop theory along with practice, just to keep it alive and relevant for us today.